I said sit down and shut up.
That's right, deviants. Sit down and shut the fuck up. You're listening to us now. My name's Joseph Bodie. I'm one half of the Joe Squared equation. I'm here with my co-host.
I'm Joe Mancini. Welcome to the third episode.
Joe Mancini. Welcome to the third fucking episode of the Deviant podcast. We're building steam slowly but surely. It's gonna happen. We're gonna be big. It's gonna be huge.
Yeah.
As a certain elected official would say. Anyways, really short bit about what this, about who we are and what we do. Deviant Podcast is our slogan. The main thing we're committed to is cogency is the only currency. It's the only thing we care about. We don't care about if it's politically trending, socially trending, social media trending. If your argument is sound, if it's cogent, we will countenance it. We will listen to it. And that's the type of community we want to build. It's a community based on sound reasoning and not popularity. And
yes.
We used to have a much longer disclaimer, but you know what? We don't give a fuck anymore. That's it. That's all we care about. Cogency, good arguments, good discussions. And we mean that. Not even arguments, good discussions. We mean that in the true sense of the word. No argument or no hate shit, no name calling, mudslinging, mud racking, none of this fucking social media bullshit. It's the only currency, and we're here to talk about the issues and just honest, intellectual ways, right?
No insult slinging, except when I say that if you're not listening to this, you can suck my dick.
Right? Yeah. We're not. None of that mud raking, insult, dirty politics, unless you're not a Deviant podcast listener. And then you go,
Go fuck yourself.
Fuck duck.
Yeah.
Go fuck it duck. Yeah. The sad thing is, that's a real phrase, go fuck a duck, and that's a hilarious image. Fucking a duck. That's really funny. Because you got to hold the duck.
Right.
You can't just
feathers flying off.
Or if you crouch down to get on the duck's level. Either way, it's hilarious. If you hold the duck or crouch down, it's still fucking
If you're doggy styling the duck, it's a strange position.
That's the only way to fuck a duck, Joe.
Yeah.
You have to doggy style the duck. What do you mean?
I mean, like on the ground, like you're like, what's that called? Push up, like a push up. It looked like a very weak push-up.
So
okay, yeah.
That right there is going to give you a good indication of what kind of shit we're going to say in this podcast. In terms of not giving a fuck. But we're also going to be very rational, and approach very real issues in a very calm and rational way, not in a fuck a duck way, which is still. I want everyone to picture that right now. I want everyone to picture a guy holding a duck and just fucking shit with it. It's hilarious. If you don't think that's funny, stop listening. Like, best of luck to you. Go to another podcast. Yeah. You're not going to get my humor at all. That's fucking horrible. Anyways, that's the pod. Deviant. Cogency is the only currency. We're only interested in valid arguments. We're interested in topics that matter. We want to talk about them in a way that matters, in a substantial way. So, that being said, let's get right into it. Let's not waste anybody's time. Tonight's episode, we're talking about puberty blockers and the ongoing controversy surrounding puberty blockers. What they are, what they do, what they're being used for, what they should be used for, what they shouldn't be used for. I do want to say a quick disclaimer. We said we wouldn't do that. A quick disclaimer for this
episode's an exception.
This episode is an exception for this particular episode. We here at Deviant, we have no issue with the transgender community. We have no issue with the idea, the philosophy behind it. with the notion of somebody not identifying with the bodily sex that they were born into. We have no issue with people transitioning. It's not about adults making rational decisions. That's not what this episode is about, right? I don't give a fuck what you do as an adult. If it doesn't hurt me, I take a very libertarian stance on this, and I get the whole. I get everything else behind. It's not, do whatever you want. You're an adult. Do whatever the fuck you want with your body. Transition, don't transition, be transgender, don't be transgender. We don't care. That's not what this episode's about. So want to make that very clear.
Yeah.
That it's not the larger community that we're taking issue with. It's just one specific issue that has arisen within this debate that we're taking issue with. Yeah. All right, so that's the disclaimer we said we wouldn't do. All right, Joe, so take us away with a history of puberty blockers.
All right, so we're talking about puberty blockers, also known as puberty suppressors. And I think it's important first to talk about what exactly they do. And I'm going to make this as simple as possible because, there's a lot of boring science behind it, but at the same time, I know that's important. I'm not discounting it. I just don't want to talk about it. But puberty blockers work by blocking the signals from the pituitary gland in the brain and preventing the production of sex hormones. So, obviously,
I'm bored as fuck already.
Exactly. So. I know, me too.
Keep going. Anyways.
The reason they were used is to prevent early onset puberty. And it's funny because Wikipedia calls this precocious puberty, which I don't know what the fuck that means.
That's the wrong word to use. Precocious.
Yeah.
Precocious seems like a weird word to use.
Is that like puberty that's doing like bad things? I don't know. It's weird. Is it like sneaking out of the house and it's like smoking cigarettes?
Like, you say like, oh, precocious in terms of like they're like they're smarter than their years. That's usually how precocious used. So like the puberty these children are experiencing is like a really genius puberty. It's like
I guess that's true. I was thinking of mischievous. You're right.
No, it's usually like it's there's a burgeoning like they're wise. Yeah, they're precocious. It's a precocious talent. Yeah. Anyways, all right. Traditionally used to stop early onset puberty.
Right. So you're I don't want to call them symptoms. I guess they would be symptoms. Puberty starts early. Doctors are concerned. Puberty blocker. Bam. No Adam's apple. No Adam's apple for you.
Not for you, madam or sir. Or whatever it may be. Okay, so that's why these drugs are on the market, right?
Exactly.
That's why the puberty blockers, just for simplicity's sake, let's just call them puberty blockers for the rest of the episode.
Yeah.
And not puberty suppressants or puberty inhibitants or puberty or whatever. You can make other names for it. Let's just call them puberty blockers. So that's why these drugs exist. They exist originally in their inception to stop a dangerous early onset puberty. Puberty usually happens around like 11 to 12-ish, between that range. Maybe even younger than 11, maybe 9 to 12. But these puberty blockers, it seems like these drugs existed on the market to, if a child was entering puberty around like 5 or 6, it was like, no, fuck, that's dangerous. We got to stop it and suppress it until they reach the appropriate age, right?
Exactly.
And that sounds well and good. I'm down with that. Like, puberty's a hormonal wreck, dude. There's so much shit going on in your body during puberty. It's a hormonal fucking wreck, man.
Yeah, exactly. Very sensitive time.
Yeah. Okay, so I take no issue with why they are originally on the market. Why are we talking about them now, Joe? or have a whole episode about them. There's got to be some deviant controversy.
There is.
That shit sounds fine.
As you may know,
5-year-olds going through puberty, stop that shit. Stop it. Nope. You don't need all that hormonal shit at 5 years old. But so the original idea for the drug seems fine.
Now,
why are we talking about it?
Now's a different story. So, they're used now to treat. How am I going to phrase this? To treat adolescent gender dysphoria, and gender dysphoria is a DSM-5 diagnosis. Wherein you're uncomfortable with your assigned, your assigned sex, and they can lead to, like, not only just I don't want to say discomfort, but
gender dysphoria is gender dysphoria is in the DSM as a psychological condition. It's not in there as it's not in there as a disease. It's a condition that arises from being a transgender person.
Yeah, conflict between your physical gender and the one you identify with.
You're going to have gender dysphoria, right? It's not a disease. It's not
right.
I'm going to say that right. But yeah, so gender dysphoria is the anxiety and distress caused by living in a body that you don't identify with. Right?
Exactly.
Okay. So puberty blockers, like you said, are now being sort of proffered as a
treatment for it.
Treatment for, but not a treatment for gender dysphoria, but a treatment for adolescent.
For adolescent. Well, now,
and yes. I think it goes even further than just adolescent.
Exactly. So it's interesting because it's only really about like 10 years old, I guess, as far as the first use of it to treat an adolescent or young person was in 2007. But in 2009, the Endocrine Society approved it as a treatment for transgender adolescents as young as 12 years old. So
okay,
that's very significant. So we have yet to see anybody who's used
2009. Yeah, so that's
we have yet to see anyone who's used this grow up. Like
and we'll get back to
mature into elderly.
Yeah, we'll get back to that point. That's a very important point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. So now the puberty blockers are being recommended as a possible treatment or supplement or device. I don't want to call it a treatment because of my issues with it, but for gender dysphoria in adolescence is one thing, but a lot of people are pushing at the puberty blockers as a treatment for kids with gender dysphoria.
That's what's interesting. They approved it for 12 years old. They recommend 16, but we're seeing actually a trend in younger ages.
Well, I think in my research it was recommended for 18 years and older.
Mm-hmm.
Not the puberty blockers, but just to like recognize gender dysphoria. If you're 18 years and younger, you needed the person's consent, you needed the parent's consent, and etc. 12 years old it's even still too young. I think there's a lot of people now that are pushing for, 6 to 8 to use puberty blockers to treat quote unquote gender dysphoria. One of the things I found in this for this new movement, this new puberty blocker movement, this pro pushing these drugs on kids. One of the pro arguments is that it gives the child more time to explore the gender possibilities without the additional stress of feeling gender dysphoria. Mm-hmm. So in other words, they can grow up without growing body, armpit hair, facial hair, or whatever traditional male puberty signs or traditional female puberty signs would happen. You can suppress that, and they can essentially be asexual while they're growing up, and then like try to figure out what gender they. So it gives them more time to explore the gender possibilities if you suppress their puberty. That's one of the pro arguments I've heard.
Right.
At the same time, though, we can talk about that point. We will talk about that point later on, I think. That's an interesting one. At the same point, on this other pro-puberty suppression, and this is from a bunch of, I found this on 2 or 3 different websites, health, like .gov sort of websites, all from physicians, so not not BuzzFeed or anything like that. One of the criteria for, and this is what I think is interesting, one of the criteria for like qualifying to use the puberty blockers, and this is from psychologists, even from psychologists on like people that are pro using this stuff, is a long-lasting and intense pattern of gender dysphoria. That phrasing is very important to my argument. A long-lasting and intense pattern of gender dysphoria. You cannot have a long-lasting and intense pattern of anything if you're 8 years old. You just can't. You've been on this earth 8 years. You've been aware of yourself for about 2.5.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You haven't had a long-lasting and intense pattern of anything at 8 or 9 or even 12. Even 12. You haven't had a long-lasting pattern and intense pattern of anything from 8 till 18. 8 to 25, you haven't had a long-lasting and intense pattern of nothing. But especially in 8, especially preteen, you cannot tell me, because the debate is in these 12-year-olds and younger, people are pushing for these puberty blockers. And if that's the criteria to justify giving them puberty blockers, that's a huge...
Okay. That's the criteria. I thought you were saying it was like that it was an effect, and I was like, how have they proven that? But you're saying
no. It's one of the criteria for giving them puberty blockers. Even on these pro puberty blocker, or not, I don't say pro puberty blocker, but these are on transgender health. These are on LGBTQ.gov sort of websites written by psychologists. I can post a link up later on. After we finish the episode, if people want it, but that's a standard criteria.
Wow. Okay.
Is that you need a long-lasting and intense pattern.
What do they consider long-lasting? Because that's 4 years max, I would think, of being aware of even your own gender identity.
I mean, I would think at least maybe not even 4 years, but 4 years seems acceptable to me. For sure. I'm saying if you're 12, you don't have a long-lasting and intense pattern of anything.
Yeah.
Of any substantial feeling, right?
I don't know.
You haven't felt anything consistently. I don't even remember what it was like to be 12.
But I do. What's the
okay.
What's the that's what I'm asking, what long term is. If it's 2 years, 10 to 12, I guess. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying if that's how they defined it, I guess I could see where they're coming from.
I think a 12-year-old could have a long-lasting and intense pattern of fidgeting. or like grabbing their crotch when they have to pee and doing that shit. Like
I still do
not
that.
Learning a lot of them do. They don't have a long-lasting and intense pattern of feeling anything significant. Is my point.
Okay.
That's my position. I don't think a 12-year-old has a long-lasting and intense pattern of anything remotely close to like adult feelings.
Yeah,
or remotely, or that should have an impact on their adult life, So,
I gotcha. Okay, well, um, where are we going from here? Like, I can totally bring
do you
up
have
some.
you? Yeah, if you have more, do you have more pro arguments, positive data pro arguments?
I have a variety. So I guess I have a variety of mostly really questions, to be honest. Like,
Okay.
I came into this definitely feeling very against it. And now I would call myself skeptical versus
Yeah.
against. So
Oh, that's surprising. You're going to have to convince me because I'm still adamantly against it. I'm still very, very.
well,
These are fucking children.
I don't want to try to
Don't
convince because
pump them with shit.
I don't like trying to convince somebody that I think this is right would mean that I think that we have all the data, which we don't, which means I'm
Which we
like,
don't.
which means
Which
I'm
means don't do
by
it.
default
We don't have
against
the
it.
data.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Yeah.
So we don't, so that's an important,
know how this shit affects people. Don't do it.
this is an important point to make is that like,
Okay.
they
All right,
say
keep
that
going.
it's temporary and they say it can be stopped and that it's reversible. The thing is, we don't know that though. And so this one doctor brought this up and I think it's a great point. He said, we don't know what happens 50 years down the line. Are they going to have the cardiac profile of a man or woman? Like, cause we've never seen someone. So
This is a very new thing. So there's a lot of claims online that the puberty suppressants are completely reversible, and if you want to stop taking them, you could just enter into puberty, right? And enter into puberty, and then bam, you're assigned bodily sex, right? If you're born a male, what we hit you with puberty suppressants at 8, and you decide at 18, now I want to be a male, stop taking the puberty suppressants. They say, the claims are, you stop taking them, puberty will happen, you'll be a male.
yeah.
Two problems with that. At least two problems with that. One, there's no evidence, there's no scientific reports, peer-reviewed things, no journals, case studies, anything that backs up that if you stop taking these puberty repressants, that you'll enter puberty. Because it's a very new thing. So we don't know. We don't know that it's reversible. And that's one of the selling points is, give your child this. It'll stop them. It'll make them androgynous. And then when they decide, you can go from there because it's completely reversible. We don't know that, though. We have no idea if that's true. Secondly, do you really want to go through puberty at 20? Puberty sucks.
Right.
Puberty's awful. Do you remember going through puberty in high school? I was an ornery piece of shit. I don't want to. You can't do that in the job world as an adult.
That's a very interesting point. Yeah.
Invested in hormonal and fucking raging and like just acting out of wild hormonal emotions. You don't want to do that as an adult.
So you'd be putting it off.
That's the sort of jokingly point. But the more important point is there's no evidence to back up the claim that if you stop it, puberty will just happen. It could be that you stop it and puberty never happens. And then you're left in this completely androgynous Ken doll sort of zone.
Yeah. I think that's a huge point because
it's a very big point.
The idea of making an irreversible decision, which leads me, here's my other points of skepticism, is that then we have parents who, now we have this both ways. We have either parents who are kind of like, the ones who you come out to, like, like people in the gay community, they come out to their parents and their parents shun them. So you have that side and you have the transphobic side of that.
Yeah.
But you also, on the other hand, have the side of like parents who think this is a trend. And I'm going to use the phrase that there's social currency in it,
There is.
And that was a concern for me, like going into this. And I know it's like those are the extremes on both ends, but it's a valid concern nonetheless.
I think there's a lot of parents out there with good intentions, right? They want to be good, progressive, open-minded parents. And so they want to not, like, they feel like they shouldn't pigeonhole their child into one gender or one gender role. They should respect their child's gender identity and everything else. And I 100% agree with that, right? You find out you're pregnant, it's, biologically, it's bodily a boy, and as a penis, it's biologically a male, right? Your child, when he grows up and he wants to play with whatever, like the child wants to put in dresses, you don't want to confine him to one. You want that child to explore gender representation options. Cool. I'm 100% down with that. Don't pump that child full of drugs.
Yeah. Right.
That's what I'm not cool with.
Yeah.
I don't see why you need to, I don't get why this pumping them full of these puberty suppressants, and I have data that says why this is harmful. I'm totally down. I'm 100% in agreement. I'm down with, I support you. Let your child be gender neutral, give them gender neutral toys, let them play with whatever the fuck they want. They want to dresses, pants, whatever. Like, fuck it. Don't confine them to this one gender representation. Totally, 100%. What I have a problem with is giving them fucking drugs.
Yeah.
At 8 years old or even 12 years old. It's not good. It alters the brain chemistry. So to that end, the puberty blockers. So there's a report that came out from 3 prominent and respected psychologists from 3 different universities. I can look it all up. I can tweet the link if you want to back up the source. It was public in the New Atlantis. One was Johns Hopkins University. The other was University of Arizona. And I forget the third university right now on the spot. I should have written that down just to cite my sources. But they say that puberty blockers are radical and experimental treatments on children. I'm inclined to agree. In addition to stopping puberty blockers also arrest bone growth. They stop, just in terms of like calcium in the bones, they arrest bone growth and bone density. They stop the growth of height. They also stop the maturation of the brain itself. There's a lot of other things going on in puberty that aren't just purely physiological. There's a lot of stuff that are happening in the brain at the same time. So these puberty blockers stop a lot of that very crucial developmental stuff from happening, right? So that's dangerous. That I think that alone is enough to say, maybe to give you pause and say, maybe we shouldn't do this, right? Again, I'm all for encouraging your child to be whatever type of person they want to be. I'm not okay with pumping your child full of drugs. When we don't know, there in that same study and in other studies, people say we don't know if this is completely reversible. We don't know the long-term effects of these puberty blockers on young children. Why? Because those young children haven't grown up yet.
Right.
We're giving it to them right now in 2018. We're going to have to wait till 2030 until we figure out if we fucked them up royally or not.
Yeah.
It's a date citing this study again. It's a radical and experimental treatment. And you need to be fully aware of that, I think.
Yeah. I think given all this, I think it does lead to some questions. First, I'm just going to, this is like a real quick tangent, but I thought it was funny.
Okay.
I'm going to say it. One of the articles I read, it was a great one that helped me get familiar with this topic, and it was for PBS Frontline. And here's the title, or the headline. When transgender kids transition, medical risks are both known and unknown. And I started reading this, and I was laughing my ass off because I was like, this is basically everything in the world. Like, like when we, drone strike Yemen, and we're like, well, they could turn into terrorists, or they could,
or they couldn't.
It's like,
or they couldn't.
It's like you typically want to err on the side of like, this could be,
Yeah, yeah.
This could be bad. This could be disastrous. I just thought that was a like really funny headline. Like they're
No,
both
it's a horrible headline. It's a funny headline. But it's also very indicative of the philosophical and like moral debate behind this stuff.
Yeah.
Because if you say, well, if you do X, it's equally possible that A and B can happen. Whereas A is positive and B is negative. So if you do X, yeah, you could get A or you could get B. Any rational person would be like, I'm not doing X then.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen. It could
Exactly.
be hugely negative or hugely positive. And that's what that headline says, right?
And that's, I think, the topic we're dealing
unknown,
with.
you know?
I mean,
Yeah.
so I really do think we can both agree that like the science isn't there, the certainty isn't there, and the concerns are there. But
Well, look, all right, let me say maybe 2 more points from this study in the New Atlantis that I've been citing.
Yeah.
I'll make 2 more points, and then we can talk about those, and we can move on to your current opinion on this subject, because you told me you might have had a slight change of heart, or that you were at least skeptical. So, all right. In this study by these psychologists published in the New Atlantis from Johns Hopkins University, Northern Arizona, and I want to say Harvard. I might be wrong about that, so don't take me on, don't take me as citing sources when I say Harvard. You can look up the study online. It's published. It's peer reviewed. It's totally legit scientifically. So, an important thing to remember is 2 important things to remember. 1, gender identity for children is both elastic and plastic. Gender identity for children is elastic, meaning it's flexible and it changes over time, right? So when you're 2 years old, 4 years old, 6 years old, 12, all the way up probably to your teenage years, probably up until like 12, 13, 14. That's when it really probably stops being elastic. But all the way up until then, it's elastic. It's going back and forth. You're playing with dolls, G.I. Joes, it's running a gamut of all these like gender expressions for your gender identity. It's very elastic, right? Meaning flexible, meaning it snaps back, snaps this way. And it's also plastic. And what they mean by that is that it's influenced by both external social forces and parental influence. That's a huge thing to remember. If your parents are constantly asking you, or not even constantly, but if they're just even asking you or just even concerned, if they see this fucking 4 to 6 year old child that's bodily a male, and I playing with G.I. Joes and then playing with dolls, and the parents are like, well, maybe he's transgender, and they pose the question, right? This child is dealing with that elastic identity first and foremost. This child is dealing with that very flexible gender identity. This child 2 to 4 doesn't even understand the concept of gender, just wants to play with shit that attracts it. And then the parents say, are you questioning that you're a boy? Maybe you want to be a female. That's where the plastic part comes in. That's the external influences, and the parental and social influences come in. The parental and social suggestions come in. And what's the one thing, not one thing, but what's a really common thing with children, right? They want to please their parents.
Right.
So if their parents are asking them if they're a different gender, this is sort of like leading the witness.
Right.
Court case, right? Do you feel like do you not feel like a boy? The child wants. This is. I hope this isn't controversial. I hope I'm not coming across like an asshole. But this seems like very basic child psychology to me. The child wants to please their parents, especially at this young age of like 4 to 6. That child is going to say, yes. It's very doubtful to me that child's going to say no. And let's just say, let's say it's a 60-40. 40% says no, 60% says yes, just to please the parent. then those 60% get put on puberty blockers. That's dangerous because the child is doing it in an elastic state, and the child is doing it based on plastic external influences just to please those external influences, right?
Right.
It's really hard. And to back that up, this study found that over like I think 20 or 30 years of study, of data, the study found that over 80% of children with gender dysphoria eventually come to embrace their birth sex, their bodily birth sex. So
that's an important statistic.
It is. It's natural. So what you can infer from that, I think, is that it's natural for kids at a very young age to have a very elastic gender presentation.
Mm-hmm.
You should not assume that they're not their bodily gender. You know what I mean? They're in an elastic state. And eventually that elastic state will snap back at some point during their teenage years. And 80% of children do that. Mm-hmm. They do eventually snap back and assign with their assigned bodily gender during their high school teenage years, you know? So those are very interesting things to me. Those are very interesting counterpoints, I think.
They are. Well,
and
they're
again,
important.
Dude, I'm okay with like at 17. I mean, I have issues. I'm okay at 17, 16, 17. Dude, I totally accept it. I totally accept you're like not conforming with your bodily gender identity at 16 or 17. I can totally accept that. Right. I think you need to be cautious, and I think you need to be very careful because your brain isn't even fully formed until you're 25.
Right.
That's just scientific. You know, the frontal lobe doesn't even come into effect 20. But I'm way more accepting of like 16 plus. Cool. I got you.
Yeah.
6 years old? No. That's child abuse.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it right now on record on the Deviant podcast. You give your 6-year-old drugs, that's child abuse, dude. Period.
That's actually something I wanted to go into. So this topic, like many, is very complex. And I started off feeling like very strongly one way about it. And the more I researched it, the more questions I had for myself and also just in general. And some of them were skeptical type questions, like is the science solid on this, like is it reversible, because those are things we should be asking first and foremost.
Oh, for sure.
But I also started having other questions about things I hadn't considered. I guess I'll just launch right into it. The first one, I'm interested in so
any questions you might have about this, you know what I'm saying? Like,
other questions.
It's kind of like a done deal for me, and maybe that's wrong. Maybe I shouldn't be so like fucking such an ostrich, you know, such a head in the sand kind of guy about this. But
so that's what's happened for me is these questions have opened it up to where I can be swayed the other direction.
Okay.
So the first thing's not really a question, but what I had considered is like the mental anguish that goes with gender dysphoria. So now when I think about it, I'm like, what happens to children who are feeling that way? That's one question. But the next question, let me just say it before we go into it, is who's vetting this? Like, I know in Canada, they have a lot of like counseling and different psychological counseling that goes along with it. Do we have those requirements? I have not been able to find that.
We do.
Okay.
Well, we have those psychological. Okay, so to answer the second question first, and the first question second.
Okay.
We do have things. We do have a psychological assessment if you're going to undergo the reassignment surgery. I know that, but that's for adults, right? So if you're going to undergo the reassignment surgery, you have to be psychologically assessed for the basically to just to know to for the purpose of understanding to make sure you know what you're getting into, to understand this is a very intense surgical procedure, and unless you're fucking Bruce Jenner, it's going to cost you a lot of money and pain and whatever, so to sort of to the second question, yeah, we do have we have mechanisms in place to make sure that people that want to transition understand what they're about to do, and we want to make sure that they're of sound mind and body.
Yeah.
Again, we want to make sure that they fully understand what they're about to do before they do it, and I think that's an important thing. I do think we want to and I think even demographically that's important. If someone transitioning in San Francisco, California, the social risk might not be that much. Someone's transitioning in Savannah, Georgia, you might get a lot of you might want to just understand the social climate. You might get the potential for hate crimes is more in Georgia than California. Is all I'm saying. Right. That's what I'm trying to say. What was the first question?
So the first, I guess, wasn't so much a question as it was that I'm starting to recognize that young people can have feelings of depression and anguish. Yeah.
Yes.
So what?
So the report that I read, to answer that question, the report that I read said that puberty blockers may counterintuitively increase that distress. And this is not it's a study. It's not a very long study. It's not definitive. I'm not standing by it. I'm just saying as a piece of evidence. This report says that if you give a fucking 8-year-old puberty blockers and not allow them, you don't allow them, basically by giving them puberty blockers, you're allowing them to sort of be like agender, like non-binary is what you're allowing them to be. And by allowing them to be non-binary, by giving them puberty blockers at such a young age, when they're already confused about which bodily gender they identify with, by allowing them to be non-binary, that may actually increase the distress and confusion about which gender they should be. Because they're not growing up, they're not entering puberty and exhibiting any traits. They're stuck in this sort of, non-binary limbo.
Right.
And so it may actually increase the distress and the confusion of the gender dysphoria that they're trying to grapple with and trying to wrestle with. So it may, in fact, and again, this is not 100% proven, but it may, in fact, be detrimental and not helpful because you're putting them in this. You're not allowing them to, because again, 80% of them might, 80% of these children wind up agreeing with their bodily gender, not their perceived gender or not their gender performance or not their gender expression, but their bodily gender. So by blocking that puberty, you might actually be, it's highly likely, the study said, highly likely that it's more damaging than helpful because it's compounding the confusion.
I think
because now they're not going into puberty and now they're not the gender blockers, like they're completely neutral. They're completely in a like no-go zone, neutral zone. So now it's like decision time, and that's more pressure and more stress, psychologically speaking. I got to make a choice. I'm confused as fuck. My parents put me on this shit. I'm confused. I don't identify with the body I'm born in. I think I might be this gender, but I may or may not be. They throw these puberty blockers on top of it at such a young age as 8. and then they have to process all this other shit, and they're not developing like the other kids in school are developing, and so it compounds the pressure.
Yeah.
Right. Like psychologically speaking, I think that makes sense. It compounds it, man. And
So I think we're seeing a lot of like conflict between, I would say, what's the word? Professional disciplines. So like, why would the endocrine society recommend this as a treatment as young as 12 when I think like the pediatrician society or whatever that's called, like hasn't endorsed it, like we're seeing there's a lot of
so you found that
here,
found the endocrine society endorsed this for 12 and up, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's interesting that we're seeing so much conflict between, like, if the science isn't there, you'd think the science just wouldn't be there,
Exactly. I think anybody that's there hasn't been the AMA hasn't endorsed this for this specific purposes of like 12 and under or young kids.
Right.
Anybody, like my opinion as a non-licensed practicing doctor,
he still practices, but he's not licensed.
I'll still take out an appendix in a bathtub full of ice and tell. But non-licensed. I'm not licensed to do it, but I'll still,
fair warning.
I'll still sell your kidney on the black market. I'll do it in the bathroom, but I'm not licensed to do it. Look, there's a lot of like of the the fucking arbiters of the FDA, the AMA, internationally speaking. There's a lot of people that nobody has specifically endorsed this. What everyone has said is that we have questions we can't answer yet because the research is we don't have the research. We don't have the research. We're not going to endorse or refute these claims because we don't know. These are very new claims. We can't say puberty blockers are reversible. We can't say puberty blockers are a good thing. The majority of the medical and psychological community are saying we don't know because this is a very new thing that's been posed to us and we're trying to figure it out.
Right.
Meanwhile, everyone's fucking running past the finish line saying this is the new thing. Give your 6-year-old kid not psychotropic, but give your 6-year-old, 8-year-old, 12-year-old kid, give your preteen fucking drugs because they know what they're doing. This is dude. Like, this is going as like non-medical. Dude, it boils down. It's as simple as this. When you're 8 to 10 to 11 years old, you don't know a goddamn thing. That's I don't need the medical, the evidence. The research we've done is great because we wanted to have a good episode and we wanted to have like quotes and whatever else, right? And we should have done that. And yes, we definitely should have done it. But my basic fucking thing is this is a 10-year-old kid. This kid doesn't know a goddamn thing. You say, what do you want to be when you grow up? He says, a Martian. We should
I don't think they know either.
What's your name? Frankenstein. Like this, it's a 10-year-old kid.
I don't think they know.
Kid.
By and large, kids don't know a goddamn thing. Yeah, by and large. But I don't want to discount. It comes from the same place for me as the death penalty. I don't want to discount the ones that do experience gender dysphoria at a very young age. And if there's a way to get that treatment, then
I'm not discounting that. And I'm not saying parents shouldn't encourage their children to explore non-binary gender options when they're 10 years old. I'm not saying that you shouldn't let your 10-year-old.
What if the only treatment for them is hormone blockers? I mean,
that's not the only. No. The treatment is wait and see, man. The treatment is let your child be themselves. If they want to wear a dress, let them wear a dress. If they want to do this gender performance thing, let them do that gender. Like, let them do whatever the fuck they want. Just don't involve drugs that are fucking with their neurochemical shit. That's my thing, because that has a long-lasting. I have a family member who was, when they were in their, between these ages, preteen, between 10 and 12, some hack fucking psychologist decided they needed to be on antipsychotic drugs. You don't put a 10-year-old on antipsychotics unless they're actively murdering rabbits or some shit. And this family member wasn't doing it. They just happened to be on like the autism spectrum, but back during this time, that was not understood, the spectrum. So they thought they were psychotic. They put them on antipsychotic drugs. And this family member is permanently fucked up from being on a heavily regimented dose of antipsychotic drugs when they were 10 years old. That permanently fucks with your brain's neurochemistry.
Yeah.
It doesn't allow your brain or your body to properly develop these pharmaceutical drugs. They stop it. It stops all sorts of shit from happening.
Right. And I think the major issue here is
drugs are not, look, again, 16, 17, do it, right? Like, go for it. Like, I think your frontal lobe is not fully developed until 25, but I think 16 to 18 is a more reasonable stance. But this push to put kids on these drugs at 8 years old.
I'm not saying, I think my point is that I think we both agree that irreversibility is a huge concern. But I think where I'm trying to get...
And we don't know.
Yeah, and we don't know. But the point I'm trying to get to is that let's pretend that like 16 is too late. Like that's where I'm coming from. My questions are like, what if that's too late? You know?
But why? Why would that be too late? It's not too late.
Because who can live with...
Caitlyn Jenner transitioned at fucking 50 or whatever the fuck.
But everyone's different. What if they're experiencing depression at 8 years old? I mean, you know.
Okay, yeah, you can treat the depression. You can address the issue. You can address the gender dysphoria. You can address the depression. You can address the struggle and the stress that goes along with that. That's very real. But that doesn't... At 8 years old, I'm just very skeptical that you have that much distress and depression at 8 years old. I find that very fucking
I think that's where we differ. Is I'm saying
interacting with a lot of
8-year-olds. Just because I can't relate with it doesn't mean it's not there. You know. No, okay, look, let's say it is there. Let's say it's there. Yeah. Let's say for the sake of argument.
For the sake of argument, let's suspend that. I fucking find that hard to believe. All 8-year-olds want to do is watch cartoons and run around. They're not concerned with this shit. They're not. They're really not. 8-year-olds aren't like, do I have gender dysphoria? Let's say.
Let's just say.
I mean, obviously they don't know the term, but an 8-year-old isn't sitting around looking, my boy. They're not fucking concerned with that, man. I'm sorry. They're just not. It's a lot of adults projecting this theoretical shit onto an 8-year-old mind.
I'm not saying that's wrong. I agree for the most part.
That shit.
I agree for the most part. It's adult projection. Yes.
For the sake of argument.
For the sake of argument,
let's say an 8-year-old is having Freudian thoughts.
Right.
And is capable of those thoughts. At that stage in that individual's development, I think the proper treatment would be like therapy, conversation, open talking, and open mind, and letting them be the person they want to be. The improper treatment is to put drugs in their fucking mouth. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying, look, if an 8-year-old is that cognizant to be like, to spout off third wave, post-feminist, postmodern theory about gender identity and, like.
My instinct is that I agree with you.
If an 8-year-old is like, oh, well, there's sex and there's gender and this is performance, I'd be like, hey, you're a really astute 8-year-old. Okay. Let's talk about this, but I'm not going to shove a fucking pill down their throat. They're 8 years old, man. Their brain is not fucking. That's just where I draw the line at pharmaceuticals for anybody under like fucking 16, man.
That's
my position.
My instinct is not just totally to agree with you.
It's not just this issue. It's like almost barring extreme circumstances. My thing is nobody, until their brain is developed, needs fucking pharmaceutical drugs pumped into their brain or shoved down their throat until their brain is developed enough to handle the changes that are going into it. It's not just this issue, but we're talking about this issue. So yeah. No, talk to the 8-year-old. Explain it to them. Let them be the person they want to be. Let them be a non-binary person. Let them be a different bodily sex. Let them wear dresses if they're a dude. Let them, if they were born a man, let them not wear dresses if they were born a woman. Let them be completely non-gendered, whatever the fuck, and figure out who they are. Yes, do all of that. Don't encourage it, though. Don't push them anyway. Let them be who they are. Do not. That's the thing. I think parents saying, like, oh, well, do you feel like you might not be a boy? Do you feel like you might? That's leading the witness. Like I said.
No, I agree.
That's dangerous. Let them be who they are. Don't push them. Don't ask questions. They're 8. Don't ask questions. Observe. Be a good parent. Observe their development. Watch them as they grow up. If you notice signs as they grow up, and as they get older, have more and more mature conversations. And when their brains are ready, maybe they need drugs.
Yeah.
Maybe then they need, maybe then for depression, for anxiety, for whatever the fuck else, maybe then they're ready to handle those kind of drugs. But 12 and under, no, fuck you.
That's true. And
that's reckless. It's reckless, dude. I stand by it.
One of my last points. No, I agree. I mean, well, I do agree, but I am questioning myself at the same time because I don't know.
Push back. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, push back. Yeah.
I have a few other points before we wrap up the episode, and you might too. But one of them I'm going to bring up because you just said something that led into it.
No, I think I've rambled enough and made my points.
So doctors say that these feelings of discomfort with gender identity can begin as young as 4. And this is going to speak to your point.
Which doctors? Is that like American Psychological Association?
I don't know. Okay. I'd have to look it up. Okay. But
as young as 4, I find that hard to believe, man.
That's not even the point I'm making, though. So
okay, all right.
Let's take it as fact for the sake of
for the sake of argument. Let's go. Okay, you're right.
My issue, and there's a lot. People talk a lot of shit about slippery slope arguments, and sometimes they're right, and sometimes I can't help but go into a slippery slope argument. So mine for this is, if we're allowing for 12, how far down the scale are we going to be allowing in the future? Does that mean a parent gets to decide for their 4-year-old? Like, look, he blinked twice. So yeah. He's
or they're
I don't know,
or they're 1-year-old or whatever the
exactly
fuck. Like I had a baby in the hospital. It was bodily sex as a male because I had a penis and testes. I took it home. I put it in a crib. There was a blue rattle and a pink rattle. It reached for the pink rattle. Bam! I'm gonna make it a woman. Right?
That's a good point.
That's a reductio ad absurdum argument. That's absurd. But that kind of points, if your 4-year-old bodily sex male child goes for like traditionally feminine shit, it doesn't mean that child is transgender. But that's what people want to think.
And you can take that the other way too. Just because a 10-year-old plays with a doll and not a car doesn't mean that they're
exactly,
or a 12-year-old. Yeah.
Here's where it gets logically muddled. Here's where it gets really logically fucked up is, let's say you're bodily sexed, and I like that term. That's a term I didn't know until today when I was doing research. But I like that term instead of like sex and gender. I like the bodily sex and whatever.
Sounds like an R&B. R&B.
Sounds like an R. Kelly song. Yeah. Before he pisses on a 12-year-old girl. Yeah.
Might be a 12-year-old boy.
I like that because it's like there's the body and the mind.
Yeah.
So I like the term. But yeah, it does sound like a bodily sex. It sounds like some bullshit song Justin Timberlake would have played to ruin the halftime.
Exactly.
Further. Fuck that halftime show. Anyways, let's not go on that debate. Look, okay, here's where it gets even more. This might be a good way to end the episode, sort of pose this question. for listeners, hopefully we haven't gotten any listener responses, but hopefully we'll get them.
Yeah.
Here's where it gets really muddled for me. So you have a 4-year-old, or let's cut the difference between 4 and 8. You got a 6-year-old. It's a bodily sex to male, right? Born with penis and testes, whatever. And your 6-year-old child, who's a fucking idiot, is 6 years old. He's a fucking idiot. Fucking stupid. It can't exist on its own. He doesn't understand concepts of gender and sex, whatever. But your 6-year-old bodily sexed male child goes and runs towards, is more predisposed to playing with, more traditionally feminine shit. My Little Oven, dolls, whatever. And so you as the parents assume, 6-year-old Tommy is transgender. He wants to be a female. But by doing that, the only thing you're doing is reinforcing like gender stereotypes. That a heterosexual man, or even a gay man, or a bodily sex male that wants to be a bodily sex male can't play with a My Little Oven or dolls or whatever. So you're reinforcing gender stereotypes by claiming that your child is transgender. Do you see what I'm saying?
True. Yeah.
That's where it gets logically. So how do you know that your 6-year-old or your 8-year-old is experiencing gender dysphoria? Because they're choosing to play with non-traditional toys that applied gender would play with? Well, then aren't you just being a fucking bigot? Like, aren't you being a traditionalist and saying, well, if he was a man, he'd play with a hammer. But he must be a woman because he's knitting shit.
Yeah.
Straight men knit shit, right? Like,
no, totally
gay men knit shit. Non-transgender men knit shit. But you see what I'm saying? Like, so that's where it gets sort of philosophically muddled to me. Is where's the like litmus test for this? Oh, well, they were drawn to this thing, and they're bodily sex male, so they're drawn to this female thing, so they must be transgender. You're making a lot of assumptions there.
Yeah.
And you're making a lot of logical fallacies here.
Which leaves room for parents to fill in the gaps due to trends or whatever, or, they get to fill in the gaps and be like, oh, I have a different child, and they get to have their own little party because it's about them at that point, not the kid,
Yeah. Right? Yeah. It's just fun. Dude, maybe some parents just want to have a transgender child because it's fucking trending right now.
Maybe.
That's a horrible thing to say, but maybe, dude. Hey, parents have done worse.
They've done worse. And they've done that, I think.
They've done worse, and they've done that, too. Yeah. They've done worse shit, man. They've done worse shit than that.
I mean, there are parents in history who have been like, I'm dressing you up because I always wanted a girl and you're a girl. And that's a form of child abuse. And they've done that to their kid. I don't know any. I just know it's happened. I'll bet you
happened. It's happened throughout history. There's a woman in South Carolina that backed her children into a lake and drowned them because she wanted.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
It's fucked up.
Parents have done worse shit. That's all I'm saying. Look.
Now, I had my own concurrent question I wanted to end the episode on.
Okay.
And so we asked.
So that's my question.
Yours is what's the litmus test, right?
What's the litmus test, and how do you reconcile a gender identity with preconceived gender notions? You're saying, I guess that's the way to phrase it, right? If gender is fluid, and then how do you reconcile? How do you know your kid is not the gender they were bodily assigned at birth just because they're reaching out to traditionally non-gender assigned objects?
Right.
Being a little bit of a hypocrite there. That's my question.
And I think it's a valid question. Mine is pretty simple. This is basically what I was left wondering after doing this research. And like I said, I came into this topic vehemently against it. And I still am very skeptical, but there's enough things that
I'm vehemently against it, but you're skeptical.
I'm skeptical of it, So I guess that's to say I'm mostly against it, but I could be swayed to change my mind maybe in the future. It seems like we need more research. But here's my ultimate question.
Let me pause you there. That's a second thing our listeners could talk about. Joe Mancini could be swayed. Joe Bodie says, nope.
Yeah.
I'm standing by my child abuse statement. So listeners, prove me wrong. I'm standing by child abuse. Joe Mancini is willing to be swayed. So weigh in on that.
Exactly.
Dichotomy there too. And then to your final question. The third point we would like people to respond to.
So, and it's not a point so much as it is after researching it, I thought, we also, and this is something I don't agree with either, but we give kids speed legally. We give children psych meds legally. We decide not to vaccinate our kids legally.
Yeah.
And none of those things are, those things are right or wrong, or sometimes one or the other. But it makes me wonder, are we focused on this because we have a bias about gender? Does it lead us to, I don't want to say too much questioning, because you can't question something like this too much. It's important what we put in our kids' body. But is this a hot button topic because it's about gender?
Yeah. And
versus my kid's attention span, or my kid's vaccines, or my kid's flu shot. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I could weigh in on that, but we'd be here for another half hour. Let's leave that for the listeners. That's a very good question. We allow all these other sorts of drugs to go into children's bodies. Why is this one such a hot button issue? That's a good question. That's a really good question. Yeah, I feel like we had a good time.
That was a good talk. We could have, if we were in a bar, if we were in a bar, we could have done this for another 2 hours. But
yeah, definitely. Well, Deviants, we hope you enjoyed that. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. We also hope, furthermore and more importantly, that you join in on the conversation.
Yes, please
do. We cannot stress this enough. We're trying to build a community. We want you to be involved. Podcast listeners, we want you to be on the show. We want to hear your opinions. We want you to be involved. So please hit us up on Twitter at Podcast Deviant. You can hit us up on Gmail for longer form responses, criticism, critiques, questions, etc. at deviantpodcast1@gmail.com. We have a website you can check out. You can leave comments and questions there. We'll, long form shit as well. deviantpodcast.wordpress.com. And that's it for us tonight. But we really want to hear from you. We hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't enjoy it, tell us why. If you think we're pieces of shit or our arguments suck or whatever, man, fucking hit us up. We'll respond. We'll treat you like human beings, and we'll have a conversation. We won't yell at you. We promise.
Exactly. Definitely. We're on the old Facebook too.
Facebook. I forgot we're on Facebook. I always forget about Facebook because, no
one's using it anymore.
That's your mother's format right
exactly.
there. Hey, Grandma, I'm on Facebook. We are on Facebook too. But
this will be on iTunes and YouTube. Just
iTunes and YouTube and Podbean, and we'll post on Twitter. So, we hope you enjoy it. And again, we really want to build a community here. We're trying to hear from other people who agree with us or disagree with us. The main thing, like we said, cogency is the only currency, but I think another thing is respect. We will treat you with respect, even if we fucking fundamentally disagree with you. I promise. We're not going to Sean Hannity you. It's going to be a respectful discussion. So, and that's what we're trying to do. If we have that element of respect, we're hoping to get a lot of opinions out there that wouldn't have otherwise be heard because they're afraid that they'll just get shut down and yelled at or called stupid or whatever the fuck. Just get sort of like ad hominem attacked. We won't do that. We will not do that. We promise. We will treat you with, unless you become hateful. Unless you start getting hateful, then
fair game.
If you start doing hate speech, we'll probably cut you off. But barring anything but like out and outright hate speech and horrible fucking epithets and shit. Barring that, we'll treat you with respect, and we want to hear from you. So, on that note, until next week, be a deviant motherfucker for the week.
Yeah.
Be yourself. I'm Joe Bodie signing off here with my co-host, my partner in crime,
Joe Mancini. Thank you for joining us for episode 3.
All right, we'll see you next time.
Good night.